Hi, Nicole. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Krista. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm so delighted to have you here and to have this moment to chat with you about your work and your book and all the things. I always like to give my guests an opportunity to introduce themselves instead of doing this like long-winded introduction of your credentials and all of those things. I really want you to just go ahead and tell the audience in your own words about who you are and what you do.
Great. So, who am I? You probably get all kinds of fun answers to
I
this,
do.
right? I'll go with the broad terms next, and then I'll add in some fun stuff. So I am a confidence coach, spiritual teacher, first time mom, and a former New York City Rockette. And in my work, I help influencers, speakers, and artists to create the impact they desire and change the world through a powerful presence. And I do this by teaching that the heart of transformation lies in discovering who you are. My tagline is who you are is your greatest power. And it really is at the root of my passion because I truly believe that, especially in these times with all that we have become very aware around with conditioning and a lot of education that's been passed down that doesn't work anymore, that the more that we can be turning inward to recognize our own power and who we are is what will actually propel us to move forward and create the life we desire. A few fun things about me. I love bird watching. It's probably one of my favorite things to do in the world. It's funny because I'll tell people I'm a birder, but they think I'm saying I'm a burner, which always makes me laugh. But I love bird watching. Migration season is kind of like my Super Bowl for anybody that is a sports fan. I love being out in nature. I love hiking. And I'm huge into anything that is Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, Game of the Thrones, all of that sort of stuff. I love a good story. And I think I think that's what I got for now for who I am.
I love bird watching too. I actually started getting into it during the pandemic because there was like nowhere you could go, and I bought binoculars and like books, and I just didn't. I also had no idea how many bird. I live in Austin, Texas. I had no idea how many different varieties live here, migrate through here, and and it's so, I don't know, it's so relaxing to watch them live out their lives as well. So I noticed that at the end of your book in your closing, I think you say something to the effect of like you can be caught, looking out at birds or something like that. I'm exactly the same way, so I love that you do that as well.
It's so funny. My husband usually goes and gets the bird seed.
Hmm.
And during the pandemic, a lot of people did. They took up bird watching, which is like
Hmm.
so exciting for the birding community to be like, that's great. Let's have more people, doing this. But he was talking about how he would go to get birdseed, and there was like they had to expand the aisles
Yeah.
because so many people were stepping into it, which was a really beautiful thing. And yeah, Texas, oh my gosh, you have an amazing diversity there of birds. I mean, a lot of people come to Texas specifically to bird because what you're getting that's coming up directly from Central and South America, which is the most diverse
Yeah.
species of birds like in the world. Like, oh my gosh, my
Hmm.
bucket list, Brazil, Colombia, Ecuador, like I cannot wait to experience those.
I know, I know. And then we have so many like wetland birds as
Mm.
well, like the gamut of the egrets and cranes, and oh my gosh, it's just so beautiful. So yeah, cool. Well, we'll have to talk about that offline
We definitely
some
will.
more. I'll have to get your sneak peek into your favorite birds. But so the second question
Mm.
is always really interesting to me. I always love digging into the past to know, how that affects who we are as people in the present. And one of the biggest things coming out of my own religious experience was creating this audio community for people to find tools and conversations and ideas that help them along their journey outside of religious institution. So
Mm.
I'm always interested in everybody's origin story with religion or spirituality or nothing at all. And everyone who comes here is spiritual. I've not had anyone that's atheist, so not yet. So what was your journey like growing up? And pick apart that for us, and then In the book, you definitely allude to your Buddhism practices and anchoring down in that. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I love this question. And I love it because it's so funny. I was just on Spiritual Unity Radio, and he asks a very similar question. And it hadn't been asked of me before, and I really appreciated the opportunity because I think it is important, especially for your listeners, so that there's always that like, oh, me too, and this helps me
Yeah.
understand the ups and downs and the questions and sometimes the left turns that you're like, what is going on? So, my beginnings were very traditional. I grew up in a Methodist household. My father was a fighter pilot in the Air Force, and we moved around a lot. So that meant that church life was usually Protestant. It was kind of like it was very rare that we were actually in a Methodist church. It was usually like Protestant, kind of like wide swath of all the people that were on the base. It was either Protestant or Catholic. It was like, yeah, just like putting people into these camps. But my mom, I don't know if you're familiar. Do you know what handbells are?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, okay. So my mom is
She
this
did those at
amazing,
church.
yes, an amazing handbell director, clinician, and solo ringer. Like
Oh, wow.
really, really, really good. And so everywhere that we moved, my mom would come into the church on base and basically head up the bell program. Like it just seemed to work that way. And my brother and I, both being raised in a musical household, because my mother, very talented musician, we were in her choirs. And so there was this real joy around being at church. It was tied up in music, it was tied up in art. My brother played piano. I also played violin and handbells. And I loved handbells. Handbells was fun. I was with a group, and it was enjoyable, and I was part of like youth groups. And so, Jesus felt like my friend. Church felt like a really fun place. And I was like, this rocks. Like Christianity's awesome. And then as I went into high school, I began to really dive into the theater, like really finding this is what I was going to do. So I was in choir, I was in theater, I was taking dance several times a week, and started to have gay friends for the first time. And it was like, wait a minute, I had some teaching that doesn't seem congruent. Because again, like I said, it was very traditional and it was like wide swath. It was probably very awkward, right? In the way that the teachings were being translated, very patriarchal in the way they were being translated. So I had been given this teaching that gay people were sinners. And I'm finally having gay friends, and I was like, this doesn't make sense. And so it was like planting the seed of doubt and like, what is this? And then I decided to go into musical theater as a career. So I BFA in musical theater, dance minor. I'm now like in it. And I was like, I'm really struggling. I couldn't reconcile with the dogma that I had been taught. And I was so, I didn't have any tools around reflection. I'll be totally honest, I zero tools. So when I moved to New York City, I tried to find some community, some Christian community, but wasn't successful. But I'll be honest, I didn't really pursue it because I was in such a place of confusion. And I hadn't put in my life someone that could help me navigate that.
Yeah.
Like that's the truth of it. So what happened was I really pulled away from organized religion. That's why I smiled when you said that. I was like, oh my gosh, I get that. I pulled away from organized religion, but I then cut myself off really from faith. Like it became a all or nothing.
Yeah. Well, and that's the crux of religion is it is all or nothing. So when
Yeah.
you're conditioned to believe us or them, black and white, all everything or nothing, you have to throw everything out with the baby in the bathwater until you
Yeah.
find that equanimity that I think, we'll talk about in your Buddhism. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. So my relationship with God it was always personal, but it
Hmm.
became even more personal. And it got to the point where it was like the only thing I was doing was saying grace before dinner, going to
Right.
church, on major holidays with family, but truthfully sitting there and having an enormous amount of skepticism and confusion. And I have to have so much love for my younger self, but kind of like, well, I know better. You know, I don't need this. I
Yeah.
don't need this. Life is fine. Except, and I realized this for the first time when I was on that radio interview, it came out of my mouth. I went, oh, however, as I stepped more away from faith in my life,
Mm-hmm.
I was having more and more problems.
Mm.
So it wasn't until I lost everything in my life, which is what the book is about, that a voice came up in my head that said, you need meditation. And thankfully I listened, and it was crazy because here I am losing my marriage. I'm trying to get pregnant, losing, I believe, what is my opportunity at having a family. I'm 37 at the time, and I'm calling out to God, help me, help me, help me. And it's like, what am I doing? I cut off this relationship, and now I'm like scratching at the door. It was such a moment of wow. I I really cut out something that I need. And so following that voice of you need meditation, I'll never forget this. It was very clear, after basically a tsunami of like everything falling apart in 6 weeks. Like it happened fast and furious. And I went to my first yoga class in weeks, and I was like, okay, today I'm going to buy a book on meditation, because this is really how it was for me. Do you know what I mean? It was like, you need meditation. Okay, I'll buy a book. Like, so
Just
much love for
taking
her.
whatever steps
Yeah,
necessary
just
to
whatever,
answer
right?
that
Whatever the
question.
next test is.
Yeah.
And I came out of yoga class, and I went to the library. You know how they have like the little categories, like
Mm-hmm.
under like for what each book is, and there was a book there on meditation, and it was, again, it's just that divine. You're just following the cues. You're
Yes.
just following the thing. I pull out this book and I open it up, and it was like every word was popping off the page, and it was a book on Tibetan Buddhism, and I was like, I thought I was looking for meditation, not Buddhism. But then there were all these synchronicities that happened. My financial advisor introduced me to two women, one who had already been through a divorce and the other one who was going through a divorce, both Buddhists. There was just this influx. I had another Buddhist, three Buddhist women come into my life right at that time. And so it really was, wow, following it, this
Like
feels
it's
like the next right
obvious.
step. Yeah, yeah. And trying different forms of Buddhism. It began with Nichiren Daishonin. I began with chanting. And that's actually the three women that I met first. And they were so loving and teaching me how to chant and bringing me into the community, because community is huge in Nichiren Daishonin, like massive. And it was helping, but it wasn't quite, this is it. And then I tried Vipassana, again, lovely, but like, I tried Tibetan, again, like amazing. I found a support group that I stayed with for years, but it wasn't like the practice wasn't quite there until I found Zen. I went to an intro for Zen training weekend, and I learned Zazen, which is what they teach
Yeah.
within the Zen tradition. And it was like my whole body just went, you're home. And so there I was, finally
Home with
finding my
yourself at a
practice.
Zen class.
Yeah, finally finding myself and finding my practice and finding faith. And what's been really interesting since that time, because I definitely went through a metamorphosis of like, I'm a Buddhi yogi, I'm a yogi Buddha, because I love, love, love all of the deities and all of the stories in Hinduism, just love them. Um, and then I just found myself settling. I settled into Zen, and now 10 years later it feels like this beautiful, like better understanding of Christ consciousness, of God consciousness in much broader terms, which is what I believe was the initial intention around much of these religions, but that got so hijacked, for
Yeah.
use of a better word. Um, so it's been really nice to find peace with the younger me that loved Jesus, that loved church, and be like, oh, I get it now. It's nice.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, thank you so much for going into all of that detail. I definitely had a similar experience when leaving the church with the question about gay people because it was so indoctrinated to me that they were, other and they were wrong. And like I cringe thinking about the teachings that were given to me about people who were gay or queer. And I feel like it's not really even my place to spend my life making sure I continue to be like a very big ally for those groups and those marginalized people. But in some way, I feel like that's all I want to do because after coming out of my own religious experience, I also experienced that otherness, like that deep otherness, because I wasn't in alignment with the church's teachings anymore or my community standards and the cultic view of like us and them. And so in some ways, it's not the same, but in some ways I had such deep empathy for people, the queer community, having been ostracized and set aside after I decided like this is not my thing, and
Yeah.
knowing a deep understanding of how they feel wanting to have a connection with the divine in sometimes a really clunky way because Christian nationalism and Christian um, institutions are what we have here for the divine in the West, right? So, and if they say you can't be a part of that, like, then it makes you feel like there's some internal separation between you and source, and there really isn't. So, I really love that you hit on that, and I really appreciate you saying that because I think it's really important.
Yeah. And I think that was one of the most powerful teachings I got within Zen was
Mm.
about othering.
Oh,
Because when
othering is
you,
the worst.
when, especially for me, it really, I think it helped me understand a lot of what I saw in the world that was uh, not just confusing, but just like infuriating. And what do I
And
do? Like,
dysfunctional.
what do I do with this?
Hmm.
And to be able to come to this teaching, I mean, first and foremost, to be able to, I don't know, bring some compassion
Yes,
to others in the world, but at the root of the teaching is what are we doing to ourselves? Because
right.
if we other any part of ourselves, any part, the part that laughs, the part that cries, the part that gets scared, the part that gets furious, if we
Hmm.
other that part, that will play out with others.
Yes, yes.
Like it's and I don't I feel like it took it took me losing everything in my life to understand how much I had othered myself,
Mm.
which was in turn creating this explosion, right? Like, thank goodness for my 13. It was a second chance. It was a sacred invitation, as I say. But
Hmm.
it definitely like woke me up to then, because of the journey I took for myself, to be viewing what I saw in front, other conflicts in front of me, to have a lens of compassion and some
Yeah,
understanding first, because
yeah.
I can be very fiery, and that doesn't help. It's just kind of like, wait a minute, what am I not accepting in myself, and how is that being reflected here? And
Mm.
what is it that I really want? Because what I came to really understand about myself and come in contact with is that I I really do want us to find understanding. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with the five elements, but
Yes.
I've just learned the five elements, and I'm very much like earth. I've got water and wood. But
Hmm.
like earth people are like, let's learn how to live together. And it means that I get my heart broken a lot, but it's been helpful for me to be like, oh no, this has been in me my
Mm.
whole life, and this is something that it's a strong element. It's a strong energy.
Yeah.
And so it's important for me, because of this element, to gain understanding.
Mm.
if we are going to figure out ways to come together, this is why I believe so much in nonviolent communication. If we're going to find our shared life energy, our shared needs, it's only going to be through a lens of empathy with myself first to be able to view someone else.
Well, we'll leave it there because we're getting too much into the book, and I want to be able to give people the backdrop first of like what it is, and nonviolent communication is absolutely everything. And I've got it here as a question as well, so we will unpack that a little bit more. So let's tell the people listening and watching what your book is called, what it's about, and what is your intention with this book to help people along their journey as well.
You got it. So we know the number 13 to be traditionally viewed as an unlucky number, but for me, it turned out to be the most transformative number of my life. Now, I had spent years carefully crafting this persona around my marriage, my career, but this book is a story about the year that all of that went up in flames. And as I watched it go up in smoke, I heard a new quiet voice within. And I was speaking about the voice of 13. So 13 is the sacred invitation. It is the auspicious calling to your heart to finally have the life that you have always desired. So this book will inspire you to create a whole new beginning and help you discover how to tap into your inner strength.
Beautiful. Yeah, it was. I when I read the book, I thought obviously there was a lot of intention around the book compilation and how it's put together, but then there's a lot of intention about numerology and the sacredness of that, and even the cover is, I think, goes back to sacred geometry as well. If let me know if I'm wrong there. So why was it important for you to put those elements in there in the book as well?
Okay, so are you a fan of Elizabeth Gilbert at all?
Girl, that's like that's like asking if I have eyes to see. Of course, I love her to the death.
So, big magic.
And she gets referenced here all the time. So
Oh,
one
uh,
of these days, I've always said if once I get Oprah and Liz on the podcast, I will shut it down.
yes. Oh my, I'm holding that vision for you.
Okay, thank
So,
you.
Elizabeth Gilbert she is the grandmother muse to this book. Like,
Oh,
when I went through all of my crap, one of my
hmm
closest friends handed me Eat, Pray, Love.
hmm
And it really, man, did it save me. It was really helpful. And it made such an impact on me that it was always living in me. And, when she wrote Big Magic, she talks about as creatives, as artists, we get ideas. And they've come from who knows where they've come from. That's the magic, right? It's the magic that's coming to you. And if you don't act on it, it will leave you and go to someone else. She tells the story of a woman who was like running in the field as a poem was coming to her, and she was like running into the house and the poem came out backwards, but at least like she got it down before it was done.
Yeah.
So I I always knew that I was going to write this book. I had a very profound experience with a Mayan shaman in 2013 that said, one day you'll write a book on healing. And I, at that time, thought, well, maybe I'll write about this year. Now, I was only halfway through 2013 at that point, so I didn't know I still had quite a bit to go. But already what I had experienced was so unbelievable that I thought, well, maybe this will be a way for me to fill my bodhisattva vow, which is to save all sentient beings by sharing my story and sharing who I become and what I discover out of this. But what happened was I decided to, through the working with an amazing life coach, I realized that I wanted to leave performing because I had a 20-year career as a professional performer, and I wanted to be a life coach, and I wanted to teach about this transformation that I had gone through, because it wasn't anything that I was taught in any of my acting classes, my singing, my dancing, like none of that. And yet it had created this powerful presence in me where I no longer felt scared in front of my audience. And that's saying a lot, because I used to deal
Yeah.
with a lot of anxiety and nerves that really sabotaged me in where I wanted to go with my career. So I started my business, and there was always something else besides writing the book. And so there was definitely an element of trusting the timing of it. And what happened for me was it got written in 2021. The pandemic ended up being a beautiful opportunity. Like so many artists. Oh my God, there was like an amazing outpouring of art that happened during that time.
Yeah.
Um, and it it came out that way. It sounds silly, but I knew that it was going to be called 13, and I knew that I wanted to take this number that had been hijacked, that had been taken over, even though it had extremely spiritual and feminine and sacred roots. That was its original intention in the world, was something deeply feminine and sacred. And it got turned into, Friday the 13th. And we won't even have a 13th floor. I mean, it got totally messed up. So I knew I wanted to bring the number back to its origins. And then I thought, well, what other numbers could I use? And so as I was writing out the year, and I was really diving deep into Eastern philosophy and specifically Qigong, I was like, well, what are some other powerful numbers? And I realized as I was talking about 13 that there were like 7 sections, and 7 is such a powerful number. So I thought, okay, why don't I talk about the number 13, the number 7? And then it was like, how do I want the book to end? And I knew I wanted it to end with the full transformation for me, which was recovering so much from my divorce that I was able to have a life partner that was completely different than the man I was married to. I mean, that's an enormous win. Whoa, did I go through some awkwardness for that? But then I was like, okay, I'm going to come back to the number 2, because wasn't that what I desired? I 2. So it was like 13, 7, and 2. And just wanting to raise the awareness that numbers and these divine sacred symbols are all around us if we just open our consciousness to them. One of the teachers that I've learned dream work from is Robert Moss. If you don't know him, check him out. He is like an amazing shaman to learn dream work from. And I was taking some of his courses, I don't know, right around like 2017, 2016. And he talks about this thing called sidewalk tarot, which is basically like you're putting a question out to the universe, and then what do you see? What's on the subway, or the truck that goes by you, or what's on the sign, or what did somebody say to you? And because after my 2013, I had such a magical transformation, and I had become much more awake to, wait a minute, life is for me if I'm just paying attention, that I started to look at what are the signs. I would be tapping much more into the magic of the universe around me.
Mm-hmm.
So those are what came through. And I have to tell the story about the cover of this book. This is such a cool story. So I had met this designer. We were in a networking group together, and we just hit it off. Like, she just understood my work on a very deep level, deeply
Yeah.
spiritual. And she went to Costa Rica to do a ayahuasca retreat. And this was the first time in her life that she was doing this. And she really felt like, this is what I need to do. And it ended up being profoundly healing for her. And when she was done with the retreat, she started seeing mandalas. So she came back from Costa Rica, and she's telling me this story. And I was searching for a designer for my book. And I was like, would you be open to designing my book and using like one of these mandalas? And she was like, yes, absolutely. I would be so happy to do that. So she did that. Like, and then what we did, this was another idea that came through for me, which was to take the mandala and break it down into all the small pieces. So there is a sacred geometry throughout the book for those that see the book as opposed to listen to it. that is basically creating all of the pieces of the whole, which
Yeah.
isn't that the journey? Discovering
Yes.
all of the pieces of your whole.
And taking little steps forward to create a bigger outcome in the end. Like I think there's so many people that get stuck in the end outcome because it seems like too many steps, and like breaking it down little by little just allows people to chew a little bit at a time. I think that's such a great idea embedded into the mysticism of the book. I wanted to ask you specifically, you are obviously in the book deconstructing your identity. And I wondered if you could tell the audience of in that deconstruction, and it's not pretty, it's not fun. Sometimes it's really scary, and it can be a lot of hard things to go through. But coming out of that experience, I think we all end up better. But what did you feel like you were? What did you feel like you became after you deconstructed?
Hmm. Honestly, I feel like I just became honest and whole. There were two main Zen teachings that really turned everything around, and I got them early on, thank goodness. And they really were, I think, what grounded me in this is my practice, which was you are whole and complete as you are. And this was really important for me because I really went into some very destructive behavior prior to my 2013 that included an affair that was off and on for 4 years and some really addictive behaviors, a lot of drinking, basically trying to tune out. Tune out the voice that was like, this is not working, your life is not working. So I had an immense amount of shame around my affair. And I wasn't quite sure what to do with it. Now, thankfully, I got into therapy for the first time in my life. And between therapy and Zen,
Yeah,
wow, I finally had the
they're
support.
both very complementary.
Yeah, and I finally had the support I needed to
Yeah,
understand who I was. But to begin with, the teaching of I'm whole and complete as I am released that judgment and allowed me instead to go into inquiry. Why? Why did I do this? And, I remember my therapist saying to me, affairs are acts of anger. And it was so helpful because I was very angry. I was very exhausted, mostly at myself, but very much at what our marriage had become, and an enormous amount of frustration for not being able to achieve what I thought was important to achieve. So
the checklist
having,
that we all have in our mind when we're
yeah,
conditioned to think the marriage, the house, the kids, the education,
Broadway,
Broadway,
that's,
whatever
yeah,
those that checklist is for you.
yeah, yeah, big time. So that was really helpful. And then the second one is that change is constant. And
Yeah.
this helped me to say, okay, so even though I am feeling like I'm barely living right now, change is constant. So I can change. And this is why when you ask that question, I feel like I have to answer it this way because since 2013, I feel like I've been on a cycle of Saturn. I can't even tell you. I've been through like three other 13s in the last 10 years besides that.
A lot
However,
of rebirth and death.
yeah, but
Hmm.
because of the 2013 and what I learned around myself and my tools and being able to connect to my power, then that was what fed me as I was going through these other challenges in other areas of my life. So to be able to say, who did I become? I became who I am, like the truth of who I am, which is something that is changing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
That's
how
beautiful.
freeing is that?
And that we won't be the same people in 6 months, 6 years, and that we are constantly changing. And I think if you're open to having that contemplative practice, you know that you don't know everything, that you will know in this moment, and that there is more information and more discovery, even about yourself, that will change the way you interact with the world and change the way you interact with yourself. So I love that you answered that. It was kind of a trick question and you landed it so gracefully. So I love that you went there because it's right. Like yeah, you don't become the one thing. There's no stagnant. We are, and we're not supposed to. That we are, evolution and growth are deeply embedded in just the DNA of our spirit and our soul.
Yeah, and I think I'll say this too, that I became the woman who could call in a conscious life partner.
Hmm.
Like I became the woman who could heal chronic pain. I became the woman who could create her family after 11 years of all the things, IVF, miscarriage, failed adoption, just all the things. Like, so it's you don't know until you're there. And this is what I think makes a 13 so powerful and so sacred, is
Yeah.
that in the fire there is an alchemy occurring, and you are tapping into a strength, and you are discovering parts of yourself through that process, that when you come out of it you are stronger, so that
Hmm.
whatever it is that you want in your life, whatever that vision is that you have, you now feel that you can embody that person, that ability, those action steps, whatever that is, because of what you've gone through.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's what I try to tell people all the time who are afraid to confront what is really holding them back, or their pain or their trauma, because that alchemical journey you're talking about, it seems counterintuitive to say, if I just sweep all of these things under the rug, if I just numb, they'll never manifest, but they always do. They manifest sideways, in various different areas. But that strength and that like agility and that nimbleness that you get with your tools allows you to creatively address everything in real time as it comes up. So I love that you said that, because that is part of the journey. And it seems like really hard at the beginning, but once you start practicing with the tools, with whatever those things are for each individual, because I think it's unique. We are the same, but we're
Yeah.
not. We all
Yeah.
need different tools. We all need different processes to get through the things that weigh us down in this human experience that is relational too. I think, I don't want to step over that. All of this is relational to what you're saying. It's relational to ourselves, but it's relational to the world outside of us, and being able to relationally, compassionately interact with people from a place of peace and stillness and equanimity is so it changes everything around us.
Yeah. I'm
Uh,
thinking of that
yeah, go ahead.
Louise Hay. I'm a huge Louise Hay fan, and one of the cards is all my relationships are harmonious. And on the
Mm,
back it says, when I create harmony within, then I can create harmony without, like in all of my relationships, because the relationship with myself is harmonious. I'm okay with all the parts that are doing this and that and saying this and that and holy moly. Okay. All right.
yeah, and I think like yeah, it's such a master's path, and it's for the rest of our lives, and life will give us a lot of fertile ground to practice everything. Going back to the book, though, I did want to talk to you about. So there is a section about awakening, and I found, your journey through Buddhism and nonviolent communication very similar to mine. The idea of nonviolent communication. I grew up in a very verbally abusive family, so and a very um, cutting family, and also I'm surrounded by people who are in the fire element, and I'm watery, so like all I want to
Oh,
do is like hug and have feelings. And
yeah.
then I'm in a family that's like fiery and wants to fight and like all those things, right? So learning that like non-violent communication is more my speed, whereas coming from a family where that's not something, fighting and cutting people with the words, it was just like that wasn't me, and I practiced that for a long time. So tell the audience about your journey through Buddhism and nonviolent communication, and how those two things are connected to, your journey, and what you learned about those on the way.
Yeah, thank you. Well, Buddhism, Zen really brought me to uh, my Bodhisattva vow, which is save all sentient beings.
Hmm.
And so coming out of 2013, I really felt like I was breaking the karmic wheel
Yes.
for my family. Like
Oh my gosh.
literally
Yes.
just for everything I was going through. And it came up like pretty early in the year that I was like, this is my role. And in 2014, I hadn't left the industry yet, but I started working with a life coach and I launched a blog and I started sharing my stories and finding how much they were helping people. And so there was this kind of like stepping into something that I had wanted to do as a performer. I think it was more I really wanted to do as a choreographer because as a choreographer, I was the creator. You know, as
Right.
a performer, the creation was only as much as I had ability, like
Yep.
within what the director or the choreographer wanted from me. So, you know, if it was a larger role and I was kind of being given free reign, yes, there was a little bit more creation, but the real creation was coming out in my choreography. And um, I found that there was a theme in the choreography about wanting to bring people together. So when I was going through my coaching training, it was also really helping me to go, wow, like again, like really getting in touch with all of this. And there was a little bit of nonviolent communication in there, but very small, like
Yeah.
really, really tiny. But the funny thing is that NVC came in when I started dating. So I went on the first date of my life when I was 38 years old. Yeah, because I met my first husband when I was 18. You know,
Yeah.
it's totally that. Like, literally, I got my BFA. 2 weeks later, I got my MRS. Like, oh my God, right? Like, I was that. That was me.
You
And
followed the prescription.
I followed what I was taught so beautifully.
Yeah.
Um, and so I didn't know how to talk to men. I didn't know how to date. I was working with a coach. I was in like this coaching community of other women that were, I felt like much better than me, but at least I could be around other women that were trying to find love and figure out how to date. Uh, and and it was great. And I ended up working with a private love coach that was had done a lot of training in NVC. So she was giving me all these worksheets. I was like, whoa, wait a minute. This is what I've been looking for. I don't know how to talk. Like I don't know how to express myself and say my needs and my feelings. Like everything is just so strange. I'm so used to the way that I used to communicate in my first marriage, but I know now that that was not helpful. So how do I communicate and call in a very different kind of partnership? And so I dived into NVC and it was just like, oh, this is it. And then I started teaching it to my clients and I was watching them transform their conversations. And I found that it was at that time I was just working with artists that it was really helpful because it was like a whole gap, right? There nobody was teaching artists how to be having these difficult conversations within the artistic team or even between like a performer and the director or these kind of things where power dynamics were playing out and keeping things completely uneven. And so I found that it was very empowering for my clients to come into what they call a power with conversation. So this is what this is what they teach in NVC, right? We're not putting anybody on a pedestal. We're not putting ourselves on a pedestal. We're coming into a power with. This is how we will create the most magic. And so I found that as I was learning it and using these tools in dating, it was working really well. And I was having more fun and I wasn't wasting time with guys that weren't great. And I used to do this inventory after every date where I would write down feelings with needs met, feelings with needs not met, and needs met, needs not met. And it would be my way to assess every single date. And man, did it make it easy. Because after looking at that, it was like, yeah, I'm not going on another date with this guy. Or, yeah, I'm going to go on another date. I had some really great needs met. But it was interesting that over the years that I was dating, to find the unmet needs kept happening, or the feeling of uneasy, mistrustful, like kept happening until I met my life partner. And it was the last first date of my life. And it was so radical for me to finally have needs met around relaxation. I felt relaxed. What? So NVC it's so powerful. And I feel like there was something that was said to me in the beginning of Zen where they were saying that, this is you getting back in touch with life, like valuing life, that every day is a gift. And, it was because I decided I wanted to live that I survived. I mean, 2013 wasn't just a divorce. I was in 2 car accidents. I was robbed, and I lost a dear friend to a heart attack. I could have yeah, I could have easily been like, this is, whether I was still breathing or not, there could have been this is just death, right? I wouldn't be believing in life anymore. And so Zen helps me connect back to life. And NVC is all about life energy, that when you have needs met, you are literally filling yourself with life energy. So they go together so beautifully. And, in my desire for people to come together and find mutual understanding on a larger scale, then NVC has helped client after client to, one, know when they need to leave a relationship. It's just not going to happen, and that's okay. And when to be able to talk their way and create a new agreement so that the relationship can blossom into something that really helps them on their path.
Yeah, I mean, that's really beautiful, and thank you for going into all of that detail. And I think like there are also just conditioning things in there that are inherent in our gender where we are not hardwired to ask for what we want because of the patriarchal system that is lived and breathed and expressed in this current society and this culture. So even if you are someone who didn't grow up in that system, like you had really liberal parents or like they were more open, there's still this ubiquitous thing about our gender that doesn't allow us to ask for what we need. And so being able to have that as a tool, I think, is so important. We're getting close to the end, and I did want to ask you one more question about the book. I love that intertwined within the story is something that is also a Buddhist teaching and philosophy, which is radical acceptance, dynamic acceptance. And you came to that place in this book, and you talk about it a lot. And I wondered what you had to say for people who are struggling with radical acceptance of self and dynamic acceptance of what is.
Yeah. Oh man.
Just
This
a
could be a
light
whole
question to wrap it up.
I'm like, this could be a whole podcast. You know what I'll offer is I'll offer the first step, which I think is really important. And this is not blowing sunshine up anybody's butt, but that it really needs to be acceptance of yourself first. So what does that look like? Let's say that there's a part of you that is just pissed. And it doesn't matter. You've done, ho'oponopono as many times, like you're blue in the face from the
I don't know
forgiveness
how many
practices.
people I know who have been like, I can't help on this again. It's just not gonna work.
You're like, it's not working, people. So if there is acceptance, think about what acceptance does. It kind of like, it's like, oh, it's okay. Like it's there. So now if you imagine this part of you that is pissed as hell and you said, okay, you're here. Maybe now you can gain some understanding about what that part needs. That part has been trying to get your attention. That's why it's on fire. But there's a reason, and there is some, going back into NVC terms, but like there's an unmet need. That could be safety. That could be understanding. That could be to see and be seen. It could be dignity. It could be choice. It could be joy. It could be love. This is for you to discover. But if you can come to acceptance first, you can start to understand the parts within you that feel like they're in conflict or feel like they're holding you back are actually serving a beautiful purpose towards your healing. So that if you accept that and then open your heart and your ears to understand what that part wants and then work towards that, then eventually, not right away, but eventually things will open up and the forgiveness or the acceptance of someone else will come only because you have accepted all of these parts of you. Dr. Robert D. McDonald is one of my favorite teachers, and he says that all parts love you. They love you. So that part that's like pissed and angry, it loves you. And there is a gift. There is a gift there. And so if you can understand what the gift is, understand what they need, accept the gift and work towards what they need, eventually you will come to a point of understanding the other because you've understood that piece within yourself. So I thought that I wanted my ex to suffer. I did. And I
I
thought I
know.
would
I'm
feel
laughing
better.
because I'm sure all of us have thought that at once.
I did. I wanted him to suffer. I wanted things to go terrible. I wanted
Yeah.
like everyone to be
Especially
like, we're
when
not,
we're experiencing pain and suffering, misery does love company.
yeah, like, I wanted his girlfriend to be like, I don't want to be with you. I wanted him to never work again because he was also an actor. Except when I would hear through mutual friends things that were going on with him, and
Hmm.
if he was struggling, it never felt good. Like it
Yeah.
wasn't satisfying. It never met the need. And so I realized that I kept looking for my life energy to be coming from him.
Mhm.
And I needed to learn how to cultivate life energy for myself. And
Yeah.
so when I could create that for myself, grounded in my faith, grounded in my tools, then I wasn't reaching so much for him to do those things for me. And that's a process, that's
Yeah.
codependency. It's these are not light things I'm speaking about. But
Yes.
if we can begin with the first step, put Ho'oponopono to the side for now. And maybe enjoy some sensation work and parts work and integration work and really gaining understanding about what's happening inside your body and the gift that it's really trying to give you because it loves you so much.
Yeah. Parts work is everything. That is that whole system, which we can't get into now because we're at the end, but I'll maybe put a link to IFS in this interview. I mean, I think it's life changing. And I think for me, when I went on the path and realized like the internal separation really was lack of acceptance, I really had this deep understanding once, like, because you intellectually and can conceptualize what they're saying about like radical acceptance, but then
Yeah.
actually putting it into your system and practicing it is something different that doesn't happen overnight. But the one thing that kept coming up for me, and I don't know if this will be helpful to anyone that's listening, but like never turning against myself. That was like my mantra, like never turning against my parts, myself, ever. Like that was it because like those unmet needs were when I was turning against myself. And so I don't know if that's helpful for anyone that's listening, but we'll leave it there for the questions of the books. I'm going to give you some opportunity here to tell everybody like what you're working on, if you how they can connect with you, what social media places you hang out, all of that good stuff.
Okay, thank you so much. So you can learn everything about the book, and this is easy to remember at 13thebook.com. 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 All the information is there. A super cool trailer, which is really like a movie trailer. And quick links. 13 is available at all the major retailers, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, bookshop.org, Goodreads, all the good places. But if you just want a one-stop shop, be able to just click a button and there you are, 13thebook.com. I would love to hear from you on Instagram. That's really where I spend my time It's Nikol_Rogers there. And my name's spelled super funky. It's Nikol and then _Rogers. So please come in, send me a DM, say, I heard you on Krista's podcast. And any questions that you have, I would love to connect with you there. And then for my website, it's NikolRogers.com, and I've got some really lovely trainings there. If you're struggling with your confidence, if you're literally like, where did it go? I'm looking under the bed. I'm looking in the closet. I can't find it. I have a free video training. You can find it right on my homepage called Reclaim Your Confidence, because guess what? It didn't go anywhere. And I'll take you
Beautiful.
through a really beautiful process to be able to reconnect to it so that you can finally bring your fearless vision to life.
Beautiful. Well, I always end the podcast in gratitude. We're never on a low note, but I always like to end on a high note and just check in with my guest about three things they're grateful for in this moment or in, this year, this week, whatever sort of rolling around your heart chakra today.
Okay, so the first one is so easy. I am so grateful for my daughter. So after an 11-year journey, I became a first-time mom this year, and my daughter is 9 months old, and she's a miracle. She is literally a miracle in my life, in our lives, and she is so close to crawling. Oh my God. But I am just so grateful for her, and the light that she brings to me literally every single day. Second thing I would say is I'm so grateful for my partner. It was quite a journey to come to him. You'll be reading about it in the book. But it is amazing after everything that I went through in my first marriage, and ultimately being married to a man who wasn't on the same page, even though he had said he was, but ultimately he didn't have the same vision I had around creating a family. It wasn't a calling within him. And so to be in partnership with a man who is so fulfilled, not just as a partner, but as a father, is so healing for like my whole system, and brings a lot of faith. And then I'm going to say I'm so grateful for this conversation, Krista. I love the questions that you've asked, and I love everywhere that this has gone. And I'm grateful for your podcast and the light that it is shining on your listeners. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming to the podcast, and we'll link your book and all of your handles so everyone can find you. And I really appreciate you taking out the time to do this interview with me today.
Thank you, Krista.
This podcast was written, directed, and produced by me, your host, Krista Xiomara, in alignment with LightCasting. Music curated and created by Mr. Pixie. You can find I'm Awake Now What on all social media channels by searching IANW Podcast. Head over to your favorite podcast app and subscribe, download, rate, and review. Come back every Sunday to partake in a new and enlightening conversation. May you be filled with love and light until we meet again.